Hello students, in the first module we have seen the meaning and definition of democracy, the kinds of democracy. Now we have identified democracy as a form of government and indirect democracy as a popular form of government. Now in this module we will try and understand what are the features of democracy and the merits and demerits of democracy, and also what are the conditions required for the success of a democracy. Now when I talk of features of democracy, basically I am talking about features of indirect democracy, and in all we can divide the features into 5. First of all, universal adult suffrage, then you must have free, fair and periodic elections. If elections are going to be there, then the third feature would be the role of political parties, the existence of political parties and interest groups. Then to voice the opinion of the people, you must have an autonomous freedom of the press must be granted, and you must have an independent judiciary. Now by universal adult franchise, what do we mean is that every adult citizen of that state must be granted the right to vote. When we say that sovereignty is granted to the people, automatically it implies that the citizen, here by people we mean the citizen of the state. Here we make a distinction between the citizens and the aliens. The word used by the Indian Constitution is the alien. So all citizens must have the political authority, ultimate political authority to elect their representatives. And the age for granting this right might differ from system to system. So in some political systems that right might be granted at the age of 18, in some others it might be 21, in still others it might be 25, but age might differ, but every adult citizen must be granted the right to vote, to choose the representative, to choose the government. Then the second feature, okay, you have granted the political authority to the people. Sovereignty rests with them. Then come to the second aspect. When will they choose? They will choose only if there is a free, fair and if there are periodic elections. Now periodic elections become very important, become an important feature of indirect democracy, because here there is some sort of a time period determined for the people to actually see whether the representatives are working according to their wish or not. So in the Indian political system, we find that every 5 years we have been granted as citizens the right to choose our representatives. So this time period enables the people to grant the government adequate time to execute its policy, to frame a policy and execute it, and also the people are able to check the activities of the government. So the checks and balances system is adopted via the periodic elections. Again, elections must be free and fair. Everybody must be granted the right to vote, of course, and vote according to their will. So here compulsory elections, unlike in some communist states where you find 100% voting, because not voting is regarded as a crime. So you are punished for it. So if I want to vote, I will. If I don't want to vote, I will not. So free, fair elections where my vote has to be a representative of my wish. That also happens to be a feature of indirect democracy. Then of course role of political parties and interest groups, because again individual actually putting forth his demand or putting forth his interests, that is a rarity. It is always as a part of a group that we are voicing our interests. So our opinion, our interests, our demands are reflected via our group again, and here therefore the role of interest groups becomes important. Existence, if you find multiple interest groups in the society, then of course it is a reflection of multiple interests. People are freely able to express themselves. I don't believe in a particular type of a philosophy, I don't believe in a particular type of ideology, another ideology is available to me. So alternatives are provided to the people through interest groups, and interest groups later on when they develop certain political orientations, they assume, and they want to contest elections, win political power, they assume the role of political parties. So, the more number of political parties in a political system, the more interests are going to be reflected. So, here every section of the society is granted the right to become a part of a political party, and if not actively involve themselves, passively involve themselves, then at least to support a particular interest represented by a particular political party. So, role of political parties and interest groups also becomes important. Then you also have the freedom of the press, which is again a very important tool which the people have been granted. The press acts again as a communication channel between the government and the people. So, people's attitudes, people's behavior, people's interests, their satisfaction, dissatisfaction, all this is represented by the press. It is actually communicated to the government via the mass media, and the mass media also acts as a channel of communication of government policies to the people, and the feedback of the people, positive, negative, whatever, people supporting or protesting against the government policies, again that reflection is communicated to the government via the mass media. So, a very important role is played by the mass media, and automatically therefore, in a democratic system, the mass media has to be autonomous. There must not be any type of governmental pressure. The mass media is not the representative of the government. The mass media has to be independent. It stands in between the people and the government. And then you must also have an independent judiciary, because finally, the role or the function which the judiciary is performing is that of providing justice. Whatever law has been made, interpretation of that law and providing justice on the basis of that law is the chief primary function of the judiciary, and that judiciary has to be independent. It has to be neutral, and it can take a neutral stand only if it is granted certain special rights by the law. So, granted certain special rights by the constitution. And if we take the case of India, we find that to maintain the independence of the judiciary, our constitution has granted certain special rights to them. So, here undue pressure of the government upon the judiciary is avoided automatically. Undue pressure of certain elements in the society upon the judiciary is avoided. The judiciary has to be adequately paid. The judiciary has to be based upon the merit system. So, all these aspects lead to the formation of an independent judiciary, which again becomes an important feature of indirect democracy. So, when we talk of democracy, we have to identify, when we say that a particular type of political system is a democratic system, we have to see whether these elements exist there, whether these characteristics exist in that particular political system. If they do not, then we cannot call it a democratic government. A democratic government has to possess these features. Understood? Then we move on to the merits of democracy. Why is democracy a popular form of government after all? Because every form of government is going to have some lacunae, is going to have some weaknesses and also some positive features. First, we will see the positive features of democracy. The most important positive aspect of a democracy is that it involves the people in governmental functioning. So, popular participation is seen at its most, at its maximum in a democratic form of government. And there are several levels of participation now. When we talk of political participation, there are several levels, and you must have heard of Rush and Althoff, who in fact has identified 11 levels of political participation. The base level, the most important level, happens to be the electoral process. So, participation in the voting process is the most important tool which democracy gives to the people, and that is why it has become a very popular form of government. Here people are able to actually, they know, they have this confidence that finally it is we who are going to make the government. So, that confidence also develops among the people a feeling of belonging with that government. So, they know that this is our government. This is the people's government. Our opinion is going to be respected. If it is not respected, then we have the right to overthrow that government. So, the second important merit of a democracy then is that democracy allows transformation to be very peaceful. So, it avoids a revolutionary kind of a change, avoids violence, avoids revolution. I know that today something is not right with the political system, that there are some corrupt representatives who are not in fact working for the benefit of the people. But I also know that after a specific time period, I am going to have the authority, I am going to have that right to change that representative. So, whether to re-elect that person or not to the parliament, that right rests with me. And so, democracy avoids revolutions. If you do not have that confidence, if you feel that no, this person is going to go on and rule in this perverted fashion, then it could lead to a revolutionary type of feeling among the people. Sense of belonging is lost. So, people no longer identify with the government, and apart from sense of belonging, you also develop a kind of discontent, and this discontent assumes violent proportions. So, this type of phenomenon, this type of social political upheaval, democracy avoids. You are granted the right to change your government. Then you also get political education and training. After all, at every level of political participation, if people involve themselves, voting, how do I go to vote, what is voting, who are the representatives, what are the political parties, what are their symbols, then you have during the electoral process, you have propaganda that is carried out by political parties. So, ideology becomes a very common phenomenon. People know what is the ideology of a particular political party, what type of alternatives are available to them, and then they also know what type of a government has to come into existence. If I have to vote, then whom should I vote for? Should I vote for X political party or Y? And why should I vote for that particular political party? So, here objectives, programs of political parties and in turn of the government becomes known to the people, and they get involved in the political process. Out of this involvement, then you have a certain type of political education, a certain type of political awareness being created among the people. So, political education, political training, popular participation, this makes democracy a very popular form of government. And there is another very important feature of democracy, and that is it is a self-correcting form of government. Democracy, if you feel that you are not, if you are going wrong somewhere, democracy provides you with a chance to correct that wrong, to right that wrong. And these features of democracy make it a popular form of government. Understood?
And does not democracy have any weakness at all?
Democracy has its weaknesses. Everything is not right with democracy. Otherwise, every political system which is a democratic system would in fact be, everything would be right with that system. You would not find corruption at all. You would not find any type of malpractice, and you would find that the society is in absolute consonance with the government. But this does not happen, because democracy also has certain weaknesses, certain loopholes or lacunae, you can call it. And the most important demerit of a democracy is that it sacrifices quality for quantity. So, here see, you have 100 people who might be ignorant, who might not have any type of political education or any type of political awareness, being granted a very important right to vote the government. Now, here the type of officials that they would vote for, the type of representatives that they would vote for, they would elect, would not necessarily be efficient. So, here quantity, numbers matter more than what is the quality of the people, what type of people are voting. And here we come to John Stuart Mill, who in fact talks about qualification for voting as well. So, the voters must also fulfill certain qualifications, only then will they be provided the right to vote. So, that and the two qualifications he speaks about is property and education. The educated must have, everybody must get a single vote, but the educated must have 2 votes. So, here some sort of a qualification for the voters is also required according to some thinkers, but this does not happen, because all democracy believes in the premise that all men are equal, and if you introduce this type of dual voting system, then this would lead to some kind of a dissatisfaction among the people. The principle of equality would be kept aside then. So, you do have merits of democracy. I mean, the 5 merits that we have identified. To briefly recap the merits: popular participation, political education and training. Then it also happens to be a self-correcting form of government, and it avoids revolution. It kind of a transformation is a peaceful type of a transformation. So this is there, but you also have along with it demerits. The first and most important, quantity at the cost of quality. The second important, again a very kind of serious demerit that we find in democracy is that efficiency of the government does not matter so much, or efficiency of the representative does not matter so much. It is the popularity of the representative that is more important. So at the societal level, people are not qualified enough, or people are not mature enough to vote for a government, to vote for an efficient government. And at the governmental level, the representatives are not efficient enough, they are more popular rather than efficient. So in the recent elections, we found that film stars were more dominant than actual people who had certain political inclinations. So whether they have any political objective or not, whether they have any vision about what sort of a government you want to have or not, that is ignored, and his popularity becomes the chief criteria upon which he gets elected to the parliament. So here we do have, I mean, people who have done service to the nation in other spheres, in other walks of life. We do have a provision to see them in the parliament. The president can appoint such people to the parliament, but actual voting process, which democracy stands for, in that voting process, popularity plays a more important role than their political literacy as such. So here that is again another serious drawback of a democratic system, that it sacrifices governmental efficiency. Then another important weakness is of a democracy is that it is an expensive form of government, because when we talk of democracy, we also talk about separation of power. Your power has to be divided, it has to be decentralized. If you have centralization of authority, then again somewhere a democratic form of government cracks develop there. You must have a decentralized authority, you must have some sort of division of power, or division of authority, and this division of authority could lead to duplicity also. So if you have power being divided between the legislature, executive, judiciary, the legislature, again now people, just imagine elections in India where people have to vote for their representative. Those representatives will be in the parliament for a specified period of time. Now here the entire electoral process itself becomes so expensive. And if you are allowing transformation to take place at intervals, then every 5 years, if we go by the regular pattern, then every 5 years we are going to have to undertake the electoral expense, which is tremendous. And if in case the people believe that no, this government cannot function properly, and if the government due to internal politics also cannot sustain itself, then you might have elections within a year, you might have elections within 2 years. And in fact, there are leaders of certain political parties, regional political parties in India, who have said that if elections are in India are conducted so often, then they would not be able to fight the election at all, because they will not have any money left with them in their fund. So this type of a situation makes democracy a very expensive form of government as well, and it becomes a kind of tool used by the wealthy. So even though all men are equal, in democracies we find that the ability to contest elections, the ability to win elections, to win popularity of the people, all this requires that you must be in the face of the people. And continuously being in the face of the people, being in news, and you know, the people always, they must know you. That sort of a known face, that requires some sort of expense, and that expense not all the people are able to bear. So because of the popularity factor, democracy also becomes only something, a mechanism which the elite, wealthy are allowed to use. So there are certain weaknesses, there are certain demerits of democracy as well. Periodic elections in a democracy would be a merit, because here every 5 years then a transformation is peaceful. So every 5 years you can, you know, the progress card they have to keep in front of the people, and if the people accept it, fine. So that is there. But it could also become a demerit in the sense that policies which in fact require a long term kind of a planning, that type of policy may not, the government may not be able to implement. So that it could lead to instability in government policies as well. Then we move to then what should we do to remove the lacunae? So there are certain essential conditions for the success of democracy.
What role education plays in democracy?
Education plays a very important role, and education, we are not using it in the term in the social sense, and we are using it more in the political sense. What we want is political education. We make a distinction between literacy and education. We, of course, if people are able to read and write, fine. But what is more important from the democratic point of view is that people must understand the political phenomenon. They must attain a level of political maturity, and education becomes one of the essential conditions for the success of democracy. They must be politically educated, and it is these conditions we divide into two aspects, the personal aspect and the institutional aspect. There are certain institutional changes which must be introduced, or certain institutional conditions which must prevail. The sense that there must be a legislative assembly to reflect the aspirations of the people. There must be a constitution, and if it is a written constitution, all the better, so that in black and white people know what their rights are, what their duties are. The government knows its area of functioning. So a constitution is essential. Freedom of the press again happens to be an institutional factor. Then you must have an independent judiciary. You must have the electoral process, and you must have an autonomous electoral commission to undertake the elections. So all these institutional factors must prevail. If you don't have an autonomous election commission, then automatically elections would get embroiled in party politics, and then it would not really be a true reflection of the people's minds. So here all these institutional factors are essential, and political education comes in the personal aspect. So the what sort of a mass should exist, what sort of a society should exist, that becomes very important in making democracy a success. So you must have a politically educated mass, a politically aware mass, and by awareness we also mean an alertness. So people must know where corruption is taking place, people must know who the corrupt officials are, and people must also be that much active to in fact overthrow the corrupt representatives. So the corrupt, if the representatives feel that the people are sleeping, whatever I do, it is going to be accepted by the people, because the people don't have any sort of political knowledge. They don't know what their fundamental rights are. They don't know that a constitution grants them certain fundamental rights. Then automatically that power that they enjoy, the representative they enjoy, that is going to make them corrupt. So if the people are alert, if the people are aware, then automatically awareness, alertness, and a kind of efficiency among the representatives also we find. So here political education, awareness, alertness among the people does automatically lead to also an efficient type of a representation, or efficient type of a representative. Then another important personal factor that we consider over here is that people themselves must also be should obey certain civil norms. Now okay, our official is corrupt, we have, and we want to overthrow him, we are that much politically aware, but what about ourselves? So here the moral responsibility of the people, or the moral responsibility of the citizen, must also be taken into consideration. So here you must have the people themselves must obey certain civil norms. Now we find that spitting on the road, that does not come under civil norms. So here that sort of a personality we must find among the citizens as well. So a clean citizen is going to make a clean official, a clean representative. A clean citizen, a moral citizen is going to make a moral official. So in that sense also, obedience of certain civil norms on the part of the people also becomes an important feature.
How we can say constructive outlook of the people is also essential condition?
Now constructive outlook of the people implies that if the government decides to make a law, then immediately the first reaction of the people in certain political systems is, no, there is something going wrong, the government is taking us for a ride. That attitude people should not, like in Pune we find that government introduced the helmet rule and immediately people protested against it, that no, this is because there is something going on, corrupt going on at the governmental level, and that is why this policy is being introduced by the government. So here constructive outlook implies for what purpose is the government making a law? What is the idea behind that particular policy? The people must be able, or they must also try to understand the difficulties faced by the government, and that the government wants to do something positive. That sort of an outlook the people must develop amongst themselves. So if we have to recap the whole thing again, the features and the merits we have recapped. Now weaknesses of a democratic government, the primary weakness we said is quantity at the cost of quality, then efficiency is again sacrificed at the cost of the popularity. So you have popular officials as against efficient officials. Then you also have democracy creating corruption or generating corruption in the society. So there are certain demerits of democracy, and essential features again we divide into two: personal and institutional. Under personal, people's awareness, people's alertness, then constructive outlook of the people towards the government, civil norms obeyed by the people, that comes under personal. And institutional, we have the constitution, legislative assembly, freedom of the press, electoral process, an independent judiciary, and also the establishment of a local self-government under constitution.
But why people's caliber and capacity is regarded as a essential condition?
People's caliber and capacity also comes under awareness and alertness. It is people's caliber. If people are aware, if people themselves are moral, then their capacity, political capacity vis-a-vis a democratic government, that we take into consideration. So the future of democracy lies, future as a form of government, the future of democracy lies in the fulfillment of these essential conditions as such. Clear?